Okay, so let's talk about soy. Have you ever been in the grocery store, looking at the tofu and just wondered, is this stuff good for me or is it secretly a risk? Well, you are definitely not alone. Today, we're going to cut through all that confusion, especially around soy and breast cancer, by looking at some of the best science we've got.
For years, it's felt like we're hearing these mixed messages, right? One day, soy is a superfood, the next, it's something to avoid. And that whole debate gets really intense when we start talking about breast cancer. So, we're going to clear the air.
So where did all this fear even come from? Well, it all boils down to these things in soy called isoflavones. They're a type of phytoestrogen, which basically just means plant estrogen. And that name alone is kind of scary, right? It led to a pretty logical-sounding fear. If some breast cancers grow with estrogen, and soy has these plant estrogens, are we basically pouring gasoline on a fire by eating it?
To get a real answer to a question that big, you can't just cherry-pick a study here or there. You really have to look at all of the evidence, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We're diving into a massive scientific paper that was designed to settle this once and for all.
What we're looking at is something called a systematic review, and you can kind of think of it like the Supreme Court of science. It doesn't run new experiments. Instead, it acts like the highest court, gathering up all the existing, high-quality studies on a topic and then analyzing them to deliver the most reliable verdict possible.
And just look at this. This chart gives you an idea of how huge this undertaking was. They started with this mountain of research. We're talking nearly 4,200 studies. From there, it was this massive filtering process, getting rid of anything that wasn't top quality or directly relevant, until they boiled it all down to just the best of the best evidence.
And that's how they ended up with this number. The final conclusions we're about to talk about, they aren't based on one study or even a dozen. They're based on the combined results of 131 human studies. That's a ton of data.
All right, so what did all that data actually say? Let's tackle the first huge question. If you don't have breast cancer, does eating soy make you more likely to get it?
Now this chart might look a little complicated, but it's actually super simple to understand. See that vertical line right down the middle? That's the no effect line. If soy increased risk, the little dots representing the studies would be on the right side. But look where they are. Almost every single one is on the left. That doesn't just mean it's not harmful, it actually suggests it might be protective.
And the researchers' conclusion, it could not be more clear. After sifting through all of that long-term data, they found a complete lack of evidence. Zero, that eating soy increases the risk of breast cancer.
Okay, but what about the other big question? This is maybe the most important one, and it's where so much of the fear is concentrated. What if you're a breast cancer survivor? You've probably been told, stay away from soy. So, what does the actual science say for you?
Well, the findings here were they were remarkable. The data didn't just show no increased risk of the cancer coming back. It was better than that. Several huge long-term studies found the opposite, that a higher soy intake was actually linked with a decreased risk of recurrence and a decreased risk of mortality. And get this was even true for women taking drugs like tamoxifen, which are specifically designed to block estrogen.
So this brings us right back to the beginning, doesn't it? If soy isn't harmful and might even be helpful, then what gives? What happened to that whole scary idea about plant estrogens jacking up our estrogen levels?
I love this slide because it puts the fear right next to the facts. The fear, on one hand, was totally plausible, but it was based on early lab studies. The finding, on the other hand, comes from actual human trials, and it's crystal clear. Eating soy just does not increase the amount of estrogen floating around in your body.
And this chart just drives that point home. Just look at that first bar for serum estrogen. That big white section, that represents 17 different studies that found absolutely no change in estrogen levels. One actually found a decrease. And the number that found an increase? 0. It turns out our bodies are way smarter than we gave them credit for. They handle plant estrogens completely differently.
So here it is, the final powerful takeaway from this massive review. Soy consumption may actually be linked to a reduced risk of breast cancer incidence, recurrence, and mortality. And that's because, simply put, soy does not have estrogenic effects in humans. The central fear was just wrong.
Okay, so let's bring this all back to your kitchen. What does this actually mean for you? Let's boil all this science down into a really simple, practical takeaway. Okay,
Three key things. Number one, a moderate amount of whole soy foods. Stuff like edamame, tofu, soy milk. It's not only safe, it's probably good for you. Two, this also seems to be true for breast cancer survivors, which is huge news. And number three, the one place to be a little cautious is with those super concentrated isoflavone supplements and powders. The science just isn't quite as clear on those really high doses.
And that really leaves us with one last thing to think about, doesn't it? If the science is this clear, why is this controversy still going on? I think it's just a powerful example of how an idea, a really plausible-sounding fear that started in a lab, can take on a life of its own and stick around for decades, even when a mountain of real-world human evidence tells a completely different and, thankfully, a much less scary story.